Where do I even begin with you? Like, for real.
I don't know.
I think an appropriate place to begin would be the Morse code thing. So I want to get into that first. But before, I want to preface this by saying we're going to be moving beyond a lot of stuff that I've talked with you about previously.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to experience Veda's work, episode 89 of the Way Forward podcast, The Waters of Life, I think is the title. So go just check out episode 89 to get a little context for where we're about to go, because we're going to go a little bit deep on this one. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for coming to Confluence again. I actually have to share this. This is pretty funny. So I invited you to speak, and you originally said no because you're on your book tour. And I just had a feeling you would say yes again. So I kept a speaking slot open. And then I think I got a text from you or something like that. And I just knew what you were about to ask me. So then I called, and of course you're like, hey, do you have another spot? And I was like, absolutely. So thank you for coming to speak. And if you'd like to see Veda's talk from Confluence as well, that's available to Platinum members of the Way Forward. It was incredible, I think, because I was only there for half of it. And that's where this first part is pretty funny. So I'm running around, running the event, of course. But I was there for the beginning of Veda's talk. I, of course, introed her on stage as the MC. And she brings up something that was specifically for me. And like, I think you said my name, like, Alec, you'll really like this one. And I wasn't there.
And then I came afterwards and said, hey, Alec, what did you think of the thing I talked about? And you said,
I said I wasn't there. I didn't see
Alec.
it. She slapped me on the arm. It's like, Alec. So this will be pretty cool, though, because I'd get to hear it for the first time. So that's the first thing I want to start with, is the Morse code thing.
Yeah. So I was excited to share it with you because I knew you would find it so interesting. And I still today find this one of the most interesting things I've learned in the last 7 days. So it's super new. I never knew about this until...
So you just learned about this prior to Confluence.
Just learned about it. So essentially Samuel Morse, who was the creator of Morse code, had written down something in his memoirs, and the relationship between Morse code and water, specifically rain, is like, I had no idea. So I thought that I would read what he wrote because I don't want to kind of not do it justice. So I'm going to read what he wrote and read it to you and everyone. So this was written by Samuel. So he said, I thought I was hallucinating at first, that silly code I just picked up for seemingly no reason. Suddenly I was hearing it all around me. Different parts of my house that the rain was falling on were telling different stories, but they were so jumbled up with each other that I couldn't tell them apart, except for one section, my bedroom window. Droplets splattered down from the leaky gutter above it outside, dropping down in distinct long and short plops. I shot out of bed and sat at the desk by my window. I lit my oil lamp, flipped open my notebook, and dipped my fountain pen in ink, furiously writing down the dots and dashes I heard to make sure I wasn't going crazy. After a solid minute of transcribing, I stopped and reread what I'd written. Susan, so grown up. Charles, a bright young man. James, who I never got to know. All three of my children, so beautiful. And the hairs on my arms stood up straight. Susan, Charles, James, those were the names of my children. But how and why would the rain be talking about them? Curiosity compelled me to continue listening. My only regret that I never got to see them grow up. So happy that I can watch them from here, even if I can't touch them. My poor husband Samuel, he tries so hard without me, he does so much. No, it was impossible. It couldn't be her, my dear lost Lucretia, who died in childbirth, speaking from beyond the grave. Was that the language of rainstorms, the breaths from the spirits of our loved ones carried down from the great above in the sky? And here I was, a mere mortal, with this silly series of dots and dashes to decode it. I thought I was being clever in creating this code, but all along, had I merely been influenced by the patterns in the rain that I'd heard my entire life? And I didn't know what to do, and my heart was pounding with my terrifying discovery. And I dipped my pen in ink, ready to transcribe more of Lucretia's words, and then crash. As soon as I put the tip of the pen onto the page, lightning struck, and it hit outside my window, nearly blinding me with its flash. And when I could finally see again, I looked outside. The gutter that had been spilling the droplets so easy to follow had been reduced to ashes, and now rain pattered against my window as incomprehensibly as the rest of the house. And I sat back in my chair, shaken to my core, and I knew what had happened. Something or someone above had not liked that I decoded their spiritual language, so they tried to put an end to it. And I thought about giving up my Morse code then and there. But no, I'd worked so hard on it, and even if it was nothing more than the culmination of subliminal influences from the rain, it was still one of humanity's greatest achievements, even if it incurred the wrath of the above. No, I would embrace and entrust my Morse code to prosperity. If I had discovered its true purpose, then certainly another would too. And then perhaps in 100 or 1,000 years, humanity could stand up to the forces of the above and listen in peace to the language of the spirits. So just a little something. I mean, that blew my mind because it makes me look at rain in an entirely different way. Mm-hmm. Imagine if rain is having conversations with us constantly and we had no idea this whole time.
I mean, that's what it sounds like there. That's incredible.
It's amazing.
I mean, like, my mind just spins, really, like my heart's spinning. It's like dropping me into heart space. I'm trying to like use language other than the mind. Even like-minded people, it's like-hearted people really pulling us into the heart. But yeah,
I think I want to learn Morse code so that I can start seeing if there's messages for me in there.
Yeah, I bet there is. I mean, damn, that makes me want to learn Morse code.
Yeah.
Wow. I think where I want to start after that, because it just reminds me of like the mysteries of this reality, and God sort of permeates all facets of it, as I've come to, believe. And God might be communicating through the water, or maybe God is fundamentally water. The bigger question is, what is water? And I know that seems so basic. And I don't mean that in the context of like H2O, but what is water?
It is the question I have been asking for the last 14 years. And I think it's one of the most profound questions that we can ask, given that by molecular count, we're 99% water, and there are more water molecules in our bodies than all of the stars in the Milky Way. And yet at school, mostly we're just taught about the hydrological system. And when I was asking that question, I kept referring back to what most people tell you, and that is it's just H2O, 2 hydrogens and an oxygen. And if a child asks you, Mummy, well, what is water? And you tell, that child it's H2O, it doesn't mean anything to them. And I wanted to find out the meaning behind this question of what is water? Like, what is the meaning of water? And someone once said to me, well, the 2 hydrogens could be feminine in the mode of levity, and the large oxygen is masculine in the mode of gravity. And together they create harmony and balance in liquid water on Earth. And I thought, well, that means a lot more than just hearing this H2O term. But when I found out that water is actually only 1 part matter, and that the rest is photonic light, meaning that water is a literal lighthouse, and all those trillions of cells inside of your body are full of light, also reading your potential, which we can get into later, then that really changed my view of this question of what is water. I've come to think at this point, and my world keeps evolving as I learn more, that I think that water is a lighthouse of the divine. And I say that for multiple reasons. And as you know, I have been doing some work with some pretty extraordinary young people that have started to guide me into really considering that water and creator are so intimately intertwined that they seem to behave as one. And I used to say that it was water and consciousness that were so intertwined that they behaved as one. But perhaps creator and consciousness together are all working in this woven fabric.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can study water anymore without studying light. And why it resonated so much for me about the light part was when I opened the freezer at the perfect time, I see there is like a light or halo that is coming out of the ice as it's just beginning to form. And because water is a lighthouse, I think in the stage where water is just starting to form, it's in this more fourth phase liquid crystal stage. It's between a liquid and a solid. It's not exactly a solid. It's not really a liquid. And in that stage, water is able to absorb more light.
Mm-hmm.
But from what I've observed, it can also share more light. And I think it actually is light that is paving the way for the design of the imagery that I am seeing in my Petri dishes as water freezes to this specific state. And the information highway comes from the conscious expression, which is received through light from the human into the water. And I say that based off something that a First Nations woman told me. And she said that she could speak to bees.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that she would watch their hives for long periods of time until one day a little bee somehow communicated to her. Mm-hmm. And I always like to give him some kind of personality for some reason. And he said, "Oh, look, we don't mind you looking at our hive, but could you please just not look at it for such a long time? Because your conscious expression is putting too much light in the hive, and we prefer it to be darker." And so where we put our conscious expression could well be where we also put our light. And since water is a container and receiver of light, when given the correct environment where it is going into the in-between stages, and I always say the secrets are in the subtleties, where it is going from a liquid to a solid in the in-between state known as liquid crystal, where it is suddenly able to have that light guide the way to essentially design an image of the information. So it takes the information
from the light
and goes into form.
Yeah.
So it takes the form of the information.
Wow. I mean, it makes so much sense. Like if you think about the human biofield or an aura, right? That is beyond the visible spectrum that we can see. Although, as you saw at Confluence, there are kids who are able to do a lot more, see a lot more in a lot of different ways. And I think we all have that untapped ability too. But like, it's like we have thought energy, and I define thought energy as thought and feeling aligned and oriented towards something, for lack of a better phrase, that projects out through our biofield. And that biofield carries that light, like carries that thought energy through the light and then can reach the water. Is that kind of how you see it as well?
Yeah, I think that it's a really interesting one, though, because I think the way that we perceive water is not correct. And I think that we all are learning that water is more than we've ever imagined it to be, because we often don't even think that there's water in the air. We might know that there is gas and evaporated water and these kinds of things, but we don't think about it when we hear the term water. The fact that we breathe out means there is water around us. And actually, I think that that's a really important piece, because that, like I've mentioned, and I will say it again, the secrets are in the subtleties when it comes to water and anything really. So we have electrical charge. That's not woo-woo. I mean, heart math can read electrical charge, right? Well, that water in the air, a certain type of that water in the air is attracted to that electrical charge, which gives us this kind of liquid antenna, enabling us to feel things in the air and receive information and bring it in. So when you go into a house and it just has a weird vibe and you're like, oh, I don't really know why I don't like this feeling, but I just don't.
Yeah.
So it comes into you as intuition. When you meet someone for the first time and you feel like you've just always known them, it's like, oh, why do you feel like that? Well, often people who have a similar resonance have this sort of similar pattern in the way the water creates patterns around you attracted to that electrical charge. It's kind of imagine like a spider web, a three-dimensional spider web all around you, moving in all these different ways. So your patterns look similar. When you meet someone, you have an instant kind of like, I'm not feeling you. Your patterns can look really, really different. So I find it really interesting that intuition could also very well be a state of water.
What?
And so as you are having this external kind of liquid antenna feeling the information in front of you, if you don't listen to your intuition, you always wish you had. So if you go and you're like, I don't really think I should get into this car today, I have to have a vibe, and then all the logical reasons, oh, you have to be here at this time, and then something might happen. What I've seen multiple times is that water isn't stuck in time and space. So water has shown me things that have happened in the past, and it's also shown me things that are about to happen, which is why I say it's not stuck in time and place, and I can give you 2 examples if you like.
Yes.
So there was a gentleman who had learnt my freezing method, and he was working with coins, and he chose a coin with a picture of Abraham Lincoln on it. And when he did the freezing technique, although overfrozen slightly, he ended up getting this amazing picture of the back of a man's head, and you could see the shoulders with a bullet wound in the back of his head. So that is essentially how Abraham Lincoln died, and how water somehow revealed that. But in the future situation, I had put my thumb into the petri dish of water, removed it, froze it using my short-term freezing method, and it designed a perfect thumb with even the lines here where it bends and the nail. And what was interesting is that the ice nail had a chip in it. And I chipped my nail in exactly the same place 3 hours later.
Wow.
And that could be termed as hydromancy. So this isn't even really new. Like if you look at the Oracle of Delphi, she was looking into the waters to tell the future. Even in ancient Egypt and Nubian times, there are statues of these people looking into the waters to see if they can see their long-lost loved ones in the water. Water is like a spiritual mirror in many ways. It could be seen that way. And so with the intuition, it's like if water is not stuck in time and space and it's reading potentials. So an example of reading potentials is I would put a sunflower seed into the water for 30 seconds, remove, and I use 30 seconds as a protocol. It's not too long, it's not too short. It is not true that if you leave it there for like 3 days, it's going to infuse more. That's actually not how it works in my field anyway. Water is more interested in your attention span. So the moment you leave it to do its own thing, it's like does something else. As long as your focus is there, its focus is there.
Wild.
And so within that, so I put the seed into the water, do the process, and rather than design the seed, it designs the outcome of the seed. So for the sunflower seed, it designed the sunflower. For the flax seed, it designed the pods from where the flax seed came from, which is like the fruit of the flax. For the apple seed, it designed an apple. And then when I let that water melt and refroze it a couple of days later, it designed another apple. When I let that melt and refroze it a week later, the apple image was still there. And with biological things and biological fluids like blood and tears and these kinds of things, urine, as well as things that hold life, like eggs, for example, and seeds, the imprints last for very, very long periods of time. So within all of that, then you look at intuition, and it is basically showing you all of the different potentials that could happen if you did X, Y, and Z. And that comes into you as an intuitive hit, good or bad. All of this is done through the different stages and types of water that there are. And I think that the world will discover that we have more than 4 stages, more than a liquid, solid, gas, and type of gel or plasma. But even in the stage of ice, there are over 300 different types of ice. And I could probably write an essay for the rest of my life on one. So understanding the complexities of water, this thing that we just call H2O, it is lifetimes of understanding. But I think where we really start to get the essence of what water is when we start aligning it with consciousness, light, sound, and creator.
Mm-hmm. There are so many threads in there that I want to pull on. I don't know where to start. One comment I'll make, I guess, is it's interesting that if you take a biological thing, right, like a seed or a human saliva or something like that, the imprint lasts much longer. And what comes up for me is like that is imbued with light energy from the creator initially. I like to think that then trickles down, and we're in this co-creative process with biology here, with nature. And because of that, that is infusing the water, imprinting on the water in a way that is different than if you were to take, like, I don't know, a piece of metal or something like that, I'd imagine, right? Is that kind of what you've come to understand?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think the living principle, where there's some biology, and I'm really interested in biological intelligence more than artificial intelligence, because I want to add this because it's very likely I might forget, so I like to throw them in when I remember. But there's a lot of wisdom that can come from indigenous cultures. And I have a lady that is First Nation here in the States, and she said that in her belief that clouds store thoughts and memories, and that because we have this biological intelligence, we often throw out ideas that come from there that mimic it. And she says that's one of the reasons we probably designed the iCloud that stores and holds information. And when you think about like the cartoons with a little bubble and then there's a little cloud with the thought in it, it's the thoughts are in the clouds.
Yeah.
And I often think that thoughts are like clouds. They go past, but we're really the sky. And one of the spiritual aspects of water is the observer. And that's a very, very important piece. And my father is a native New Zealand Maori, and in the Maori culture, there is a very special word for spirit, and that is wairua. Wai means water, and rua means two. And although I'm saying this in a very fundamental way, and different tribes even have different meanings around it, the English translation is two waters, the physical and spiritual waters. And we think we understand the physical waters, and even that I have to debate. But the spiritual waters, I think, are a direct reflection of other states of water. So an example of that could be when someone has had a near-death experience, and I've interviewed many people that have, they say they have a sense of rising. Now, what rises in a state of water?
Yes.
A gas. And then they observe themselves without any attachment to that body. So they have become a witness. They've become an observer, right? And then they can go on to have some kind of life review and have an experience and all these kinds of things. And there was a study that was done on 21 people who were born blind. They've never seen the world. They say they actually haven't even dreamt in pictures. They only dreamt in the other senses. And these people had all had verified near-death experiences, meaning that doctors were present at the time and recorded it, blah, blah, blah. And what was quite interesting about that was that all of them who had never seen the world or even dreamt in pictures, after having a near-death experience, they came back and were able to explain to the best of their understanding and explanations that have been told to them and feelings of the world what they could see in the room. So they could explain what the doctor looked like, with the words that they had for that, and what the room looked like, and what they saw in the afterlife. But they came back into a body that was blind. And then many of them went on to dream in pictures. So then the question could come in at, what is it that sees?
Mm-hmm.
But I also like to ask the question, well, what is it that thinks? Because Dr. Mauro Zapatera, who is a Harvard doctor, and I know we're both friends with him, and he specializes in the cerebral spinal fluid, right? And I was very happy because recently he started to share something that I have known about for years. And many people have never heard about it, and many people probably wouldn't even believe it if they did hear about it, but it is absolutely true. So he showed a brain scan of someone who was a French guy, had a perfectly healthy, normal, functioning life. After being in a car accident, they found that, and having a brain scan, he only had 10% of a brain in the brain cavity, in the head, and the rest was full of cerebral spinal fluid, but he had had a perfectly functioning, normal life. Another incident was a 19-year-old girl from California. She had excelled through school and had a perfectly happy, normal life again. And she was in a car accident. And when they did a brain scan on her, they found she only had a brain stem.
Wow.
And there was a man called Dr. Lorber, I think is his name, and he worked with patients with these kinds of incidents of very little to no brain for something like 30-odd years. And he said he saw more miracles come into his office than all the miracles in the Bible. And he said that half of the patients, around about, that had this issue were severely disabled. But the other half were the ones that had the least amount of brain in their head, were quite often highly intelligent and had no functioning issues in their body at all. So the questions are, well, what is it that sees? And then what is it that thinks?
Mm-hmm.
What is this consciousness? And if you're looking in that one incident, it's surrounded and filled with cerebral spinal fluid, which is 99% water. And the first cerebral spinal fluid we ever get comes from amniotic fluid. And I've always thought that amniotic fluid would be a storehouse of ancestral information, which makes absolute sense to me because that's how the baby receives that information, through the fluids. It's water communicating with water communicating with water. Water is always in conversation with itself, even the water in the air into our body. And one of the very first people that inspired me to even start my work, he was a radionic engineer. His name was Thomas Hieronymus. And he went into a Parisian meat market on a very cold day, and it was very frosty, and he noticed that the freshly placed organs of animals seemed to be affecting the way the frost froze on the glass behind where they were placed. For example, the frost would freeze into the shape of a liver organ, above a liver organ, and so on and so forth. And each organ has something called a sonic signature, which is like a cymatic imprint for form and function. And so the water in the blood was sharing information about its form with the water in the air, and the water in the air, because it was so cold, was given the right environment to display that information in picture form as it hit the glass. And so when we start looking at all of this, and we even then look at morning dew, there is so much that water starts to reveal about our world, not only of the world that we can see, but even more interestingly, in the world that we don't see. And for those people that say they can see spirit leave the body, how do they explain that? They talk about it like a vapor, like a mist, like a cloud, all different states of water. So that then, I've always thought that, and I mean, I'm going off on a tangent now, so stop me if you like.
I'm mesmerized. You're fine.
Well, I've also always thought, what would be the tether of the soul? If you believe that we have a soul or a spirit, for example, and we are told through all different belief systems and religions that the soul leaves the body upon death. Okay, well, perhaps water can explain how, but how can people that have died and then how can they come back? What's that tether? How can we have out-of-body experiences? How can we be the observer ourselves in dreams? How can we have these kind of out-of-body experiences but then come back into a body? And I think this is like a really good question. And I think that it's possible that the tether of the soul is electrical charge. And if it is electrical charge, see, I've interviewed a couple of people with profound near-death experiences where they haven't come back into their body in hours.
Wow.
Their body was considered dead for hours. This lady, she woke up in the morgue when her mother was signing the death certificate.
Yeah.
So how the heck is that possible?
Mm-hmm.
And how could water possibly explain that? Well, one of the really interesting things, I had Dr. Jerry Pollack, as I know that you know Jerry well too. I had him on one of my webinars a couple of years ago. And he went on to talk about one of his people working for him was doing a study to see what would happen to the exclusion zone water, or this fourth phase water that's inside our cells. What would happen to it on death? Would it just kind of disappear, like all of the different signs just kind of go down, the signs of life just kind of disappear and just go flat? Or, did it take longer? What happened? And so, although I'm not much of a fan of this, but this is what they did, and we learnt from it, was that they had a egg and the chick was just starting to form. And when the chick's heart was beating, they stopped it. And they took the vital signs of everything. And everything, except for the exclusion zone water, dropped. The exclusion zone water didn't drop all the way down. It did go down, but not all the way. When they introduced infrared light to it, it shot all the way up. And it took hours to come back down, right? And so what do they do to you when they're trying to resuscitate you? Very often they use those paddles, and then they do CPR. They're trying to get that electrical charge, that hit back in your body, right? And so what if when that happens, it shoots the exclusion zone up? And we are not distilled water, we're an ocean. So we are a mix of salt, water, minerals, and consciousness. Where there is salt water, there is some electrical charge. If it is moving, there is some small charge. So as long as there is still some movement of salt water in the body, or some kind of movement within the exclusion zones of the body, that creates a small amount of charge, which to me would be some kind of explanation as to how the spirit might come back into a body after being away for such a long period of time.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Where I think I want to go next is like, this is a big question. I've thought about it a lot. Is water itself like actually alive and sentient, or is it just a passive receiver and transmitter of the information, whether that's our thought energy, something physical, some information in the akasha, or etheric information literally floating in the ether between us, which I think those are I think of those as being one and the same, like the ether stores the akashic records, right? Yeah, that's like a big question, but what are your thoughts?
I think the world is probably most comfortable with the last part you said.
Yeah.
And I have been always very reluctant to say what I don't know. So
Yeah.
I'm also saying I don't know.
Yeah.
But my feeling is leaning more towards the first one. My feeling is leaning far more into water as an intelligent designer, water as a kind of sentient being. I say that more so now than in the past, based off things that I've witnessed myself and after speaking to the community of people that I've recently been talking to, which I know we'll get into soon, because there is great consistency in what they are saying, and I take what they say very seriously. I think that as when you asked me, what is water earlier, and I would say that water is a container of the divine consciousness. Does that mean that the container is alive and conscious? Well, when you look, what is the container? Then you start to see that everything is connected. And I think that, just like Bruce Lee said, be like water. Water becomes the cup. It becomes the teapot. So water perhaps would become the human. Someone once said to me, what if water is expressing consciousness through us in every living thing to observe itself from every perceivable and imperceivable perspective? And I think that that is a very interesting thing to ponder. And to answer your question, I think that water isn't just conscious, it could very well be consciousness.
Yeah, I wrestle with that question all the time.
Yeah.
And I tend to think it's the former. I have no way to prove that empirically, but I don't care. I just
But
think
when you
that,
just look, it's in every living thing.
yeah.
It's that relationship between water, salts, minerals, and consciousness. We can't just brand intelligence or consciousness with the human yardstick. I mean, everything is intelligent and conscious for its certain form and its function. And I think that we have a lot to learn from observing things for long periods of time, from ants all the way to trees, to whales, to humans, to whatever. But it's in the long term of observation of something, which is where you start to really see its living qualitative aspects, its personality. And I've seen that water is in all of those things. And it is water and its relationship, I think, with salts, which is why I don't use distilled water in my work.
That was one of my questions. Let's go there.
Let's go there. I have worked with distilled water to be able to tell you that I don't work with it for a reason. Most scientists work with distilled water because it's considered pure. It doesn't have the salts and minerals or anything much in it. But I'm more curious about, water that is more like a human being.
Yeah.
Because again, we're not distilled water. And working with distilled water shows me one specific thing, a signature pattern. So in my work, we see three things. We have a signature pattern which allows us to see the type of water it is based off repeated patterns. So rainwater kind of looks like a fanning pattern, like my hand. Water that's gone through a filter looks like compacted lines. Water that's come straight out of a spring looks like a hexagonal pattern, but like a snowflake, and so on and so forth. And distilled water has its own signature pattern. But when I've worked with it showing pictures or words or any of these kinds of things, I never see complex imagery. So I think of distilled water more like an observer only. Whereas I love to work with spring water and water that just has natural salts and minerals in it. Salts and minerals are crystals, essentially. And we have crystals in all of our technology, and they help water to store information for longer. It's also why I use glass dishes, not plastic dishes. Glass is made of silica. Silica is a type of crystal. It helps water to store information for longer, right? It's also hydrophilic, water-loving, which helps build exclusion zone. And so when I'm kind of working in this area, I'm starting to see that actually, water itself, as spring water, is more like an active participant that can both store memory and information, but it also has the ability to be the observer, like us. We have memory, we are creating memories, and we also have the ability to observe. And in all of my years, I've often asked the question, is my consciousness impacting the water, or is water conscious somehow?
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, well, how can I not be the observer? How can I not, be consciously impacting the water? How can I take myself away from that? Because I've found that, for example, I work with municipal tap water sometimes as my control, and I even hate that word, but people know what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Because I don't consider really what I do experimenting, and I don't use that word because I'm a body of water that doesn't want to be experimented on, and I give water the same respect, given the fact that I see it respond, not just react,
Mm-hmm.
in a really intelligent way. So I go and collect my tap water from Auckland. So I live rurally, and we have rain catchment. And I have the tap water in a glass cupboard, in a glass jar in a cupboard. And I keep it there in the dark until I need to work with it. But if I wake up one morning, and this has happened a couple of times, where I project my consciousness over to it, and I'm like, oh, that poor tap water over there, it's all disordered and all sad, and it's in the cupboard all in the dark by itself. I feel so sorry for it, and I start sending it some energy, even though, I actually just couldn't help it. And then perhaps that day I'm going to work with it, and now it's ruined because the municipal tap water is no longer completely disordered. It has now got ferns and flowers, and it's got images of little happy faces in the ice, and it's just like completely destroyed as a control water because my intention in that early stages of just waking up and putting my thoughts towards it have completely changed its structure, not its chemical components.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really interesting, important piece, is that what we're seeing is that water is changing structurally but not chemically yet. I hope one day that can happen.
Yeah.
And I do believe in the future times, as consciousness evolves, that absolutely can happen.
I would think so. I mean, like when you think of alchemy and transmutation, Gerald Pollack and I were talking about that when I interviewed him, and he's like, there's a lot of empirical evidence on the validity of transmutation from a scientific context of like what's occurring inside our bodies. And one example would be like a chicken's egg has so much calcium in it, but a chicken's diet isn't sufficient to make up for that amount of calcium. That would imply some transmutational process happening inside the chicken to produce that amount of calcium. There's countless other examples of that too. So I think like if water is fundamentally alive, which I believe it is, again, I have nothing to back that up, then if we have transmutation occurring in our bodies, and chickens do as well, water might have the same thing happening to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had people ask me, can you change the scent of water by thinking of flowers? Can it suddenly be like rose water?
Mm-hmm.
Can it do this? Can it do that? And I've had evidence of water doing something really, really unexpected. And it's kind of a weird story, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But years ago, I went and I had someone with me, and she and I were doing some deliveries to different people of the special water that had helped heal me. And so we'd gone and we'd just collected it. I had my blue glass bottle, and it was in my bottle, and we'd just collected it directly from the spring. So I was the driver, so I was driving. And this lady had said, oh, why don't we go to this place? I need to pick something up. And I was reluctant because there was somebody who owned that particular shop. And I'd had a really, really weird vibe with her. Let's just say that. She had a very unusual energy towards me.
Mm.
And I was like, I don't know, I don't really want to, because like she was kind of strong energy that I didn't really want to be around. She said, it's okay, I'll go in and I'll go and get the things. So I waited in the car park, and I hadn't really been drinking much of my water at that time. There was still quite a lot left. And so I'm sitting in the car, and that lady's sister, who I'd also kind of met, who also gave me a weird vibe, she came out of the shop, And she went round the car 3 times. And I'm like ringing my friend going, oh, there's something weird going on here. You know, you better come out quick. But before she'd gone into the shop, she said, do you want me to pick you up anything? She said, do you want me to get you any chips? And I don't know what you call them. I think that, what do you call them in America?
Chips?
Like not hot chips. You know, the crisps. Like, what do you call them here?
Chips. Yeah.
Oh, you call them chips?
Yeah.
Anyway. And she,
like
and I,
thinly sliced potatoes?
Yeah. And I said, just don't get me salt and vinegar. I don't like that.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, yeah, okay. Anyway, this woman, after circling the car, goes back into the shop. I'm like, oh, thank God she's gone. This is like really weird.
Yeah.
Because she wouldn't look at me. She didn't look at me. The whole time she's just going around the car. Anyway, my friend comes back and we get in the car and I'm like, this is so weird. And so then we're just driving back home. We have to go through the tunnel. Just before the tunnel, I said, oh, could you please pass my water? Because I was thirsty. And she gave me my water. And I took one sip of the water, wound down the window, and spat it out.
Whoa.
And she said, what's wrong with it? And I'm like, when did you put vinegar in my bottle?
Whoa.
And she said, why would I put vinegar in your bottle? I'm like, seriously, this is vinegar. And then I gave it to her and she was like, what the heck happened here? And we were both kind of freaking out because the only thing I'd asked her not to get me was salt and vinegar. Now the water tastes just like vinegar. We get to her friends, so she's friends with her neighbor. She's so freaking out. And she was like, this was way beyond what she could have imagined ever happening. Give it to her friend and says, does this taste like vinegar to you? Or have we just eaten something and then all we're tasting is vinegar? And he goes, what are you drinking vinegar for?
Wow.
So it was like someone else confirming that this is in fact now vinegar.
What?
So it was like crazy. And I'm like, not going back to that place anytime soon. But I can't still to this day explain how that happened.
What the heck? Oh my goodness. This brings up to me something that you said in the video you sent. And I hope it's okay that I reference the video with Noah and what was the other?
Adriana, his sister.
Yeah. I believe you said this in that video and you've probably said it in other places, but the quote was, we don't know how far energy can go. That was something that you said in the video.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it was something that you were repeating that the autist had said, but when you're talking about how you have this container of water that is municipal tap water that's stored in this, cabinet in your kitchen, and you just briefly like, oh, can't help it. Like, I feel bad for that water, knowing what you know about water. How could you not? Like, water's supposed to be flowing and moving, and it's like in a dark, cold corner. But it's instantly changing that water. And then, how you have this experience where you're thinking about vinegar and then the bad vibes of this lady, you're kind of sketched out about her. You're so much focus on that. And then the water that you're drinking.
I want to add the one piece that was really important to hear about the end of that story that virtually nobody knows. And I don't know that I've ever actually even shared that particular story on a podcast.
Yeah, well, thank you.
But I took it home because I'm like, I have to do some crystallography here. Like, what's going on? And when I did some crystallography on it, it was quite interesting because I started to see this kind of, I guess, face show up. And then when I let that melt and I gave it all of my love and intention, what I saw was almost like a color change. So it was kind of cloudy as the face emerged in the ice. And then when I let that melt and gave it just all my love, it became clear again and there was a hexagon in it. And when I went to drink that melted water, it wasn't vinegar.
Wow. That sounds like transmutation to me.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
That's wild. Got to sit with that for a second.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. I think this is goes without saying, just like the mysteries of this substance. But what's more important to me is that, irrespective of what's going on with it, it's very clear that we can impact it. By your work, like you read your book, You have thought, and then you have remote thought, and it's pretty clear that whether it's direct thought with water that's next to you or it's water that's thousands of miles away, projecting your intention on it can actually impact it. And when you talk about how water permeates all facets of this reality, and water is in, on, and around all of us, and it just sort of makes you think about the power that we have, and I would say the responsibility that we have to carry ourselves in such a way that we are not adding to more of the chaos of this world, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to put us in a state of shame and be like, oh, like, look, all of the bad things that I've done. You've always talked about how water is non-judgmental. And if water is a link to or an aspect of God, whatever you want to call it that, and God is all loving and non-judgmental, then it would just make sense. So it's not to put judgment on ourselves. It's just for us to be more mindful, like, oh, we have a direct impact just by our thought energy alone on all things around us and things thousands of miles away if we wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I think that is just so unbelievably incredible. And that's why I love that quote of yours. We really have no clue. We're just beginning to scratch the surface and maybe really rediscover what so many ancient esoteric and spiritual traditions already knew, that we have such incredible power inside of us as human beings. And water is helping us remind that, or helping remind us of that.
Well, even when you look at a seeds have 10% of water inside of them, and that 10% holds all of the potential for their outcome. But we have 99% by molecular count of water inside of us, or 70% if you want to go by volume. Imagine the trillions of water molecules in our bodies reading and waiting for us to step into our potential. Because water has already seen our greatest potential, and being able to even just take direction towards it, it starts to be able to see which path you can take and which potential you can grow into. And that's what excites me, because I think we're in a world right now, although there may be a lot of things going on, it is an exciting time to be around.
Amen.
And there is so much hope. And the study of water, I think, is one of the most critical places for us to start to look for the potential for the future of a conscious world that does not resonate at a lower frequency. You know, someone once asked me if water could be deceived. Could you trick it? And I'm like, well, I think that water is a lie detector test, to be honest. I really don't think that we can go ahead and do this. And why would I ever want to? But this person said, well, you know, if you look at Nikola Tesla's work and you look at Victor Schauberger's work and you see that they were geniuses and there was an anti-gravity device and there was free energy and all of this kind of stuff going on, but you look at the end of their life and how things worked out for them, it was not good. And then their work was taken and used for more nefarious reasons. So like fire can burn you and heat you and all of these kinds of analogies. It's kind of what happened in their world. But this guy was saying, well, what if we could have a world of water as technology where it could not be deceived and would not work in an environment whereby someone was being deceitful because it didn't resonate at that lower frequency within technology, right? And I thought that was fair enough reason. Like, he was being really sincere. And there are some pretty amazing potential technologies coming out with liquid crystal, for example. And don't let me forget to mention that afterwards about liquid crystal as a technology.
Okay.
And so we're asking me, you know, can water be deceived? And I'm like, well, okay, let me try. I would never, ever do this again based off what happened. Well, that was a very big learning curve for me. So as, you know, as whatever it might sound to anyone, I simply asked, I said to water, can you please show me something so beautiful, but it will just be between me and you, and I will not share it. So I lied. I immediately froze it because I knew I was going to show it to that guy. I froze it as quick as I could before the guilt set in. because I felt so bad. And it is so not my nature to lie.
Mm.
And so I'm like, oh God, why did I have to listen to this guy? Why did I have to do this? Why am I doing this? This is crazy. I felt so guilty. And I'm waiting outside the freezer. I don't even want to open the freezer at this point. And I was working with spring water. So I immediately thought I've just destroyed its structure. Like, why did I have to do this? And I'm trying to remind myself that it's okay and that, you have a good reason. But anyway, I open the freezer and hold the dish up to the light. And there is some disorder, but there are 2 letters that spell a word in the ice. And the word was no. I'm like, oh God, what have I done? And people think I get used to this stuff, but like one image sometimes can take me a year to process, to really kind of let it filter in. When this happened, every little part of me felt like it was the first reprimand I'd ever had from water as this kind of energy. And I felt so bad. And for a week, water wouldn't play with me anymore.
No way.
Yes, I was like beating myself up so well, 10 out of 10 for that. And towards the end of that week, I had to remind myself of something you've just said that I always say, which is water is not in judgment.
Yeah.
And I have reasons for saying that, which I can explain. But I reminded myself, who's in judgment here? Me.
You.
Big time.
That's what's standing out for me is you were
Big
judging
time.
yourself. And it's necessary for a point, though, too, because deep down you're not in alignment.
Oh, yeah. No,
right?
I felt the guilt before I even put it in the freezer. But I thought, well, I have to look at why I did this. And it wasn't a bad reason. So I decided that I was going to forgive myself because I realized that I wasn't going to be able to move forward in any way, even personally, even if water never worked with me again. Forgiveness is a superpower that we all have. And so I was able to forgive myself. And the very next crystallographic image that I got before I even took it out of the freezer, I could see it in iPhoto photo, was of this perfect heart. And water and I have been in right relationship ever since. But it taught me something. It taught me that, forgiveness is so precious, so important. Because when you're feeling guilt and the weight of that or anger at somebody else that has done you think has done you wrong, you create this huge stone in a river. And it has to find all these other ways to try to get around it. And things take so much longer. But once you forgive someone or forgive yourself for something that might have happened years and years and years ago that you're still holding on to, when you do that, there is no longer that stone in the river and you are free flowing and everything can change from that moment. And so I realized in that stage that water is not just reacting. It is responding. And I think the dream study that I did, where I was wondering, is water conscious or is my consciousness impacting the water, which I touched on a little earlier and didn't go into, was really also telling. It was during lockdowns in New Zealand, and I was staying in a place called Lang's Beach. Beautiful area, very private. And I decided I was going to do a dream study for approximately 3 months or so. So I dragged the freezer into the bedroom and I sleep in complete darkness. So all of this was done in the dark. The only time there was light is when I opened the freezer to put the dish into, right?
I see what you're getting at here. So like the only light input could have been emitted from you, possibly,
well,
right?
There's also infrared light.
Yeah, there's infrared
so
light.
You can't
is
take
ubiquitous,
that out.
But still, if what you had said earlier, that biological intelligence imprints on the water much better than, non-biological
and I like
intelligence.
I like the word received by the water because you know what we do as humans?
You're right. Imprint.
Is this like imprint. I hear this and I know people mean well. but I hear this. I'm going to program the water. I'm going to imprint the
Good
water
points.
to do what I want so
Yeah.
that's going to give me better health. And they mean like, I'm going to give it love. I'm going to do this. But at that point, they're doing what all humans tend to do, and that is control
Yes.
something
Such a good point.
which is ultimately free. And I don't want to do that. I love that water is wild.
Yeah.
I have this analogy, and we must get back to the dream part. I have this analogy, though, which is the way that I work with water, right? And so if you go to like a petting zoo, and there's a cute sheep and like the little animals and the bunny rabbits and stuff, and we have a place called Sheep World in New Zealand, and we like to go there, and they have these really lovely deer there, and it's all nice. And we have a lovely time. It's great. And then we come home, we say, oh, it was so cute, blah, blah. But if you compare that to going out into the forest, being one with the forest, and then maybe out of the corner of your eye, you notice that there is a little deer looking at you, and your heart goes, oh my God, there's a deer looking at me. And then maybe it comes up to you. Maybe it lets you touch it. Maybe it comes and it just nuzzles into you, and then it runs off. And that is an experience you never forget, because you've created an environment safe enough for it to want to enter into. And the only difference is that it was wild. And so the more we try to control water, the less we see. I was asked ages ago by these lovely people that really wanted to scientifically prove that what I'm doing is real, even though I actually have more repeatability than virtually anyone else in the area of water crystallography.
Well, Dr. Mark Bailey, who I consider to be one of the most brilliant, empirically oriented people I know, he's also a New Zealander. I had referenced your free-range egg study on an interview with medical doctors for COVID ethics. So it's a bunch of MDs, PhDs who I'm presenting to, and this one guy who viewed it was like, oh, so you're falsifying virology, but then you turn to water memory. And I'm on a thing with Mark Bailey responding to that. And Mark is like, as far as I'm concerned, like Veda has much more repeatability than virology does.
Oh, man. But I mean, it is, to me, amazing how much repeatability there is. Yeah. But I am in constant amazement all the time. But so these people were like, oh, let's get a scientist involved. And they had various companies. And so this scientist was coming over from Canada, and they basically paid him to work with me for a week. So he didn't have a lot of time to set anything much up. He would have liked robots to be involved, so no humans were involved, to keep it about as clinical as possible. But he had no time factor for that. Plus, I don't know how seriously he really took this. But still. So he had a small lab, and I taught him my freezing method, which is pretty simple, and thousands of people around the world are doing it, as you know. And so he had this experiment set up, and I said, well, this is really about your relationship. This is about conscious expression. And so he was like, well, scientifically, we want to see if it's going to do it without that. So we don't want any of that going on. So we had someone else program his laptop with a series of about 1,000 different random photographs. And so he had it on this random thing where he pushed a button from outside the lab somehow, and it made this random amount of like pictures just kind of flick through. And then they would land on one, and he wouldn't know what it was. He wasn't looking in. And so that one was exposed to the dish for the period of time. Then he would come in, and the laptop lid, like this thing, it was so he when he came in, he just put it down. So he never saw what that image was. So he wasn't projecting any thoughts or anything like that. I mean, it was a whole weird setup, if you ask me. But anyway, and so he did this thing, and then he put it into the freezer, and he did the freezing process. So he did this every day for about 8 days, and then he would ring me in the morning. And it was like the briefest conversations I've ever had with anyone. He goes, was that Veda? Yeah, nothing there. I was like, okay, that was it. He was like, okay. And after like day 3 or 4, I'm thinking, this poor water, it must feel like it's a lab rat or something. This is feeling really horrible for me at this point. So I think it was like about day 7 or something like that. And he rings me up and he says, well, there's definitely something there. I can see it. My colleagues can see it. We can recognize it as a thing, but it doesn't reflect the picture. I'm like, oh, okay. Well then, what was the picture? And he said he showed it, and it was basically a stainless steel kind of kidney shaped thing that they put organs in from the hospital, and it had a human heart in it. And I was like, oh God, okay. Well, what did the water show? And the water had designed a perfect circle with 2 eyes, a nose, and a sad face.
Wow.
And I said, oh, so you think that that sad face has nothing to do with the heart inside of this stainless steel dish? You don't think that water is saying, where is your heart? And although he found it actually really interesting, they never ever took it any further.
Wow. What's crazy to me backing up is this is similar to like the scientific community not understanding the implications of, hey, we're testing this against placebo. Like we're going to give these people sugar pills and 30-40% of people got better with just sugar pills. Like, what does that imply about the power of our thought energy? Likewise with this, he's like, no, we don't want any of your thought energy or my thought energy impacting it. It's like just the sheer overlooking of the implications of that alone is wild to me. But then also it's still cool that water reflected back. It's just, yeah, it's incredible.
I think that there is so much that we can learn from the long-term study of water in a way where we're actually seeing water as with living qualities, as opposed to all of these things we say, this is dead water, this is this water, and this is what. I think all water has potential.
Yeah.
I have seen dramatic changes from tap water that I've then let melt, held to my heart lovingly for 1 minute, and then seen ferns and flowers show. And you could see tap water a bit like someone who was sick or deemed to be sick. The doctor could have said, right, you have cancer now, go home and, be with your family.
Continue on this thread, but I'll get back. We got to get back to the dream. You held it in your mind.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
And so the person might go home and feel really terrible, and this is really scary, and have all of the different feelings that might come with that. But then there'll be a person who gives them a hug, makes them a cup of tea, gives them a blanket, says, you know what, we're in this together. We're going to be fine. We've got tools, we're going to be okay, blah, blah, blah. And that person very likely is going to start feeling better. But the doctor could say, well, you still have cancer. But nobody can control how that person feels, only them. And that's why I think what we're seeing is actually something more akin to an emotion. I often wonder, imagine if water is an emotion that we can see. In our greatest sorrow and in our joy, when tears, they come out of our eyes, they roll around our cheeks, coming back towards our mouths because they've been reordered and restructured to either help heal our hearts or expand them further. So water is a medicine. And I've always said that if eyes are the windows to the soul, then tears are an expression of spirit. And imagine if those tears really are spirit and an emotion that we're literally seeing. Imagine if a stream or an ocean is full of emotion that we just have never really thought to give it that term to. So, then when you're on a healing journey, a natural healing journey or any healing journey, I would say that an attitude of gratitude is one of the best places to start. And just like the tap water structurally can change, but maybe it's still got the chemical components in it, that attitude of gratitude, remembering that, like Buddha said, thoughts become things, and many other incredibly evolved people have said similar things. Well, if that attitude of gratitude is the focus every day, and we're not feeding the fears constantly, then there is an opportunity for spontaneous healing, because the more you remind or share with the waters within your body that are living waters and have intelligence, that actually there's so much to live for, there's so much to be grateful for, then that is one of the many ways I believe that we can start that healing process. We may see structural change here, but imagine compacting that and compacting that and compacting that every single day. So with dreams...
Real quick before the dream, I want to make one point.
We're never going to get to dreams.
We'll get to it. We'll get to it. So Taurus, right? That's the top view of the human biofield, or anything that has a biofield, or aura, right? And that center point is the point of stillness, where I think it our soul is seated in our heart. That's the way I like to look at it. And our heart is not pumping, but vortexing the blood, infusing our blood with the essence of us, the essence of our soul, essentially. And that still point is where that soul sits. That's the way that I've come to understand it. And what's wild, I had a conversation recently with Austin Whitsitt, and we were talking about that. And I just had this epiphany as I was looking at my daughter's eyes. That looks like an eyeball. And you talk about that black point in your eye, or in anyone's eye. And it's also interesting that the eye is comprised of primarily water. It's the highest concentration of water in the body, I believe, right? There's something about that phrase, the eyes are the window to the soul, that just hits so differently when you consider the eye being the same shape as a torus, and that still point in the torus being where the soul sits.
And magnetic.
Yeah, and magnetic.
As well. You know, I used to before the whole last few years, I would go into schools and I would say to the children, eyes, you can see your reflection in each other's eyes, and they immediately turn to each other and they would stare at each other and they would like, oh, that's true, I can see myself. But when you look deep into somebody's eyes for a long time, then you start to see also their faces seem to change and morph and look different. And so I think there's a lot more there. I think there is almost a technology in the staring into the eyes of another person that happens. It's like there is an invisible tunnel between the two that allows you to go inward into that person, and maybe far into that person's history, and then they can become and look even different. I think there is technologies within all things that look like black holes, and our eye pupil is one of them, and our eye lens is 99% highly ordered structured water. So we literally see the world through the lens of water. And you talk about that still point in the middle. Well, I often think of that still point with water as a mirror. When water is still and pure and clear, you look in and you can see your reflection back. When it's all moving and everything, then it's all over the place. It's having a different experience. You're having a different experience of you. But in that still point, you can see a direct reflection of who you are. And in the old times, that's how we first saw ourselves. Water was the first mirror. And so, we can go into lots of directions with this, but I would say something that I used to work with when I had my wellness center. And anyone can do this, which I really try to offer as many things that are free and easy that people can choose to take on board or not. But when I was working on somebody, I could feel their energy. And I always felt that where they were the most in emotional pain felt like freezing cold, like ice. And ice is the most uncomfortable place for water to be, which is why I'm happy I work with liquid crystal. It's that fine little edge between a solid and between that liquid, where it's actually able to share the most information, and also in the melting stage.
It's also interesting as it applies to fourth phase water, but let's set that aside.
Yeah.
Too many threads. Continue.
Anyway, and I felt their pain as freezing cold. And it was often stored around the pericardium of the heart. And so I would say to them, look, I am feeling pain around this area. and it feels like freezing cold. So I want you to visualize it as ice. Now, my hand is the sun. I want you to imagine that it is the sun. And I'm going to place it over your heart area where it is freezing cold. And I want you to feel as it melts. And as it's beginning to melt, I want you to tell me. And they could always feel it. But what I was waiting for was I could see when their belly was starting to get really full. 100% of the time, they needed to go to the bathroom.
Wow.
And then they would come and they said, you know what, I can't believe how much I peed. I know I didn't drink that much. And so it went from something that could be seen as simply esoteric and spiritual, but it immediately went into a very physical release. And if you imagine that your hand can be the sun and that you can place on your body where your emotional pain is and release it from the stage of ice into liquid crystal and let it then be water to be released, you don't have to hold on to that anymore. There is something you can do, and this is great for people that just don't like to talk about their problems. It is something that no one has to know you're doing, but that has been working for all the time that I had my wellness center. It was amazing.
What's up, you guys? I'm here with Matt Maruka, the founder of Raw Optics, to talk about something that I would say the overwhelming majority of people in the holistic health community totally overlook: light and circadian rhythm health.
All of our cells contain these organelles called mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. They make energy, they convert food into useful chemical energy. And it turns out mitochondria are largely controlled by our circadian rhythm. Our mitochondria are more active during the day under the influence of sunlight. When the sun goes away, our mitochondria have the opportunity to rest, repair, and regenerate when we're not being active. When it gets dark, the brain releases melatonin, and melatonin goes in and actually repairs the mitochondria, repairs all the oxidative damage that happens. Now, if we're exposed to blue light from all the artificial light sources, your phone, your iPad, your computer, your TV, the lead scientist we work with, Dr. Alexander Wunsch from Germany, actually calls it light doping. So people today are sort of being light doped by their employers with artificial blue enriched lighting to increase their productivity at the expense of their health, mental health, and long-term health and well-being. And so just by being exposed to artificial light at night can actually have a massive effect on the body's rhythm, cellular repair, and overall health and function. So we designed lenses that specifically block these disruptive wavelengths of light. So that's why we created daylight lenses. They protect your eyes from the physical damage of short wavelength blue light, but also offer a bit of a protective and relaxing effect for your hormonal system as well, but not to the degree of the sunset lenses, which are designed to basically make you really tired and even kind of knock you out in the evening. So these are the two lenses we offer so that you can have protection at the right levels, in the right way, at the right time. And then sunset lenses, you wear these 2-3 hours before bed or just from the sunset until sleep so that your brain can register, okay, the sunset, it's time for me to release that melatonin naturally so I can wind down and not have to use alcohol, weed, sleeping pills, and other things that so many people unfortunately have become dependent on because we're constantly disrupting our body's release of its natural sleep hormone.
So if you want to take control of your light and optimize your biology, head to the show notes or go to rawoptics.com and use code TWF10 at checkout for 10% off. What if nature's intelligence could directly influence your physiology, helping to regulate your nervous system, sharpen your intuition, and shift your emotional state in a measurable way? For over 25 years, Lotus Way has been pioneering the use of flower essences, liquid infusions that capture the bioenergetic imprint of plants. Unlike essential oils, these remedies work on a vibrational level, interacting with your body's meridians and electrical system to promote clarity, resilience, and balance. Katie Hess, who I featured on episode 74 of the Way Forward podcast, has spent decades studying the effects of over 300 rare and powerful flowers, hand collecting them from across the world. The result? A line of elixirs, mists, and anointing oils, and even some chocolate, designed to shift your state of mind and body, not through placebo, but through the subtle yet profound ways plant frequencies interact with human biology. I think flower essences are severely overlooked in the wellness space because it really is an incredible way to package up the wisdom and the innate intelligence of nature and deliver it to your body. And it brings your body back into coherence because it's tuning you on an energetic level like an instrument. So if you want to find which flower essences are right for you, you can take the flower quiz so you can see which ones match your current energetic state. As a listener of The Way Forward, you get an exclusive discount. Just use code ALEC10 for 10% off your first order. Or if you're the Way Forward member, get 20% off plus ongoing savings, and just reach out to us if you're a member and we'll get you your membership discount. Just go to lotusway.com/Alec or just head to the show notes so you can experience one of nature's most powerful energetic remedies today. Yeah, let's please go into the dreams finally.
Finally. Well, so as I had mentioned, I had dragged the freezer into the room, which you know that I sleep in the dark. And I would put a petri dish of water beside my bed each night with the intention that maybe it captures some part of my dream. And so in the morning when I would wake up, have you ever had the experience where you've had a dream, you know you dreamt, but the more you try to remember it, the quicker it disappears?
Yes.
So those were the only petri dishes that I would freeze, because if I remembered the dream, then of course I could be projecting. And I wanted to see what water was doing when I didn't know about it, what I didn't know about. And so I would freeze those dishes. And what I found amazing was that the imagery from the dream time was clearer than the imagery in the waking state. So much so that 9 times out of 10, it was able to jog my memory of the entire dream that I was then able to record. And it was quite shocking to me, really, how clear the imagery was. And I recorded this dream study for the 3 months or so. And I have a whole list of dreams that the imagery from the crystallography, where it had jogged my memory. And one was so cute. It was like of this sheep, and I was living on a farm and there were so many sheep around. I'm like, I can't believe I'm dreaming of sheep. But like, it was adorable. And I'm like, that looks like a sheep. And then I'm like, oh my God, that was my dream. And then there was one where I was walking along railway tracks and it was so clear that it was a railway track. And whenever I show people, which is regularly, when I'm in these in-person talks, there's always a gasp. Like, oh my God, that's amazing. And there was one where I was in like big waves and there was a ship in the ocean, and it was like I was feeling like, when am I ever getting off this ship? Which was really a show of how my emotions were, because when we look at dreams and emotions, when we see water in dreams, they are relative to our feelings and our emotions. And so, that fascinated me. And my question became, well, how can water accompany me through the dream time and be the observer of my dreams if it is not somehow related to either, I don't even think it's just the subconscious, the conscious state, and the unconscious state, I think is related to them all. And it came back again to water being an observer as one of its spiritual states. And that was really helpful for me to start to piece together that I actually think water is more leaning into consciousness as opposed to it just being something that is a receiver of my personal consciousness. Because I started working with words that I had no visual for as another way to try to answer the question that I was asking about consciousness. Or is it conscious, or is it picking up on my consciousness? And so I started to work with words that were conceptual words, like the word ego. So you can't buy ego at the store. You don't know exactly what ego looks like. We might know a few people, or all of us have a bit of ego going on, really. But so we understand this concept, but there's no picture for it. So when I worked with the written word ego and put my dish on top of it and did the process, water designed these big shoulders, a long neck, a little face, and a giant balloon head. And it was like an art piece for ego. And when I used the word grief, I thought maybe tears or a broken heart or something, but no, Water designed the outline of a person with holes inside. And when I used the word acceptance, years later, it designed a very similar shaped person with a droplet that looks like a little heart inside. And so it was very, very different, but the imagery was actually very similar. And it's fascinating when you give something years apart and then see very similar imagery show up.
Mm.
It is a very specific message that is being projected through the waters.
Mm.
And even with free energy, I don't have a real visual. I mean, I guess I could think of like Tesla's coil and all of the electricity coming off it. But for the word free energy, we get emanations of the hexagon. And I get the same kind of thing actually with tears. So I've frozen tears, emotional tears and chemical tears. Chemical tears are when you cut an onion and just tears happen. And when I've done that, I have seen what looks like my iris. It also kind of looks a bit like a cut onion.
Mm.
But with emotional tears, from grief to relief and to laughter, all the emotional tears are variations of the emanating hexagon. And with grief, the main difference is that the spacing in between is much wider than the very compacted, very complex hexagon of relief. Whereas laughter, you can see the hexagon, but it's also covered in light. And light, it's not just light coming from somewhere. Light can be captured on camera, like I mentioned, light coming out. It's that kind of light.
And in your book, there's so many examples of that.
Yeah. And then with the example of the baby. So I have a friend who was pregnant. And I said, can you please think of your baby and drink some water and then leave me some so I can freeze it? And so what she did is she drank some water, held her belly, and then gave me the leftover water to freeze. When I froze it, we saw this very clear outline of a baby. And there was a bright light around the head and spine of the child that I think absolutely represented cerebral spinal fluid. But this was where we saw two perspectives in one crystallographic picture. So from her perspective, she's imagining her baby, and we see that. But from the baby's perspective, what might the baby have seen in an energetic form? Well, her hand was on her belly. There is an image of a hand in light at the bottom of the crystallography.
Wow.
So we're seeing multiple different perspectives in one image. And water will often show me things that I'm not focused on. An example would be I was working with this kind of Nubian-shaped pyramid that someone gave me. And so my dish was kind of in front of it, and I did it on the table. And in the back were these coasters, and it just showed me the coasters as well. And it showed me the pen in the front that I wasn't even focused on at all. And so water will often reveal its environment as well as my focus.
My goodness. So many mic drop moments in this. One thing that I want to revisit the dream thing one more time, because something sort of occurred to me with that. It's really interesting how water receives better, or it's, the imagery is more clear in water when you're dreaming. And there's something to be said about that might relate to water's just capturing what is coming from us, right? I'd imagine these states you weren't lucid dreaming necessarily.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so water's just capturing what is coming from us, right? Versus what we want it to be, right?
Yeah.
Which is also interesting as you think about going back to the heart likely being the seat of the soul. And you talk to so many people who've reversed stage 3, stage 4 cancer, or Anita Marjani, who had that incredible near-death experience and then came back and resolved all of her cancer. And whether they directly state it or not, a lot of them talk about like getting back into a heart space, right? It's also interesting that the heart has the strongest electromagnetic signature of any organ in the body. you talk about moving from your head to your heart. And if that heart is the seat of our soul, which is who we truly are, then you're accessing more of you. So your ability to actually create within this reality, whether that's healing conditions for yourself or create out there in the world, is directly related to you being more of you and less of the conditioning you've received in this life. Especially if you talk about how a lot of people say the highest frequency you can embody is love, bliss, or something like that. But the most powerful frequency that one can embody is authenticity. So it's pretty clear to me that water in a dream state is picking up on what is authentically happening versus what we want it to be happening. And that's not bad or wrong or anything. It's just that in our waking state, inevitably, as a result of being in this world, that's always going to happen, and that's okay. But the more we can access the authentic aspect of who we are, given that water permeates all facets of this reality, it would imply that we have a much better capacity to create magic in this realm when we're operating from that state. I think you see what I was getting at there with all that?
Yeah. Well, it's like water it knows all your secrets. It knows intention. And it responds accordingly. In those different dream states, it's showing you aspects, it's showing me anyway, aspects of what I am seeing as an observer. And that observer state is a very interesting one. There's so many little overlays there with spirit. And, I find it interesting, again, back to that observer. Like, for example, my son had broke his arm. He was skateboarding and he had to go to hospital. And the doctor says, we're going to give him something called ketamine. And he's going to be here, but he's not going to be here whilst we fix his arm. And so Rama was definitely in an altered state. But afterwards, I said to him, what was it like? And he said to me, Mum, it was crazy. He said, I was in the room, and he said he was in a corner of the room and he was watching the back of his head and he was watching them working on his arm and doing all of that. He could see me and he could hear me, and he was an observer of his body being worked on. And then he went into some wormholes and stuff like that and all of that. I'm like, wow. And I said, have you ever experienced that before? And he said, oh, yeah. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah. I'm like, when? And he says, at school. I'm like, what? What are you doing at school? Like,
Yeah.
Dr. Edith, is Dr.
Edith your teacher in that school?
No. No, quite the opposite. He said, actually, I get so bored sometimes that I just come out of myself and I look at everybody from the ceiling. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's why you had such a profound experience, because you maybe used to doing that. But the fact that he could be in that sort of this two places at once, the observer of his body, which is still living, being worked on. And I think water, one of the reasons that I think that water is an ultimate truth is because when you apply it to pretty much anything, it makes things make more sense. The more you study water, more things start to seem like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. And then it's like water seems to somehow literally be the mirror of life. And I do think it is a universal truth that when we come back to it, water is something of which all life has. It is a component, and it is in relationship with minerals and salts in this world and consciousness, and they weave together this life. And if you think about it, we are bodies full of memories. We're very attached to the fact that we have a life. Like, if I was to say, well, I have a life and it began when I was born, and when I was 5, this happened and this happened and this and da 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 da. And we recall our life from memories, all of them. Every single piece of our life has become a memory to this moment, and now this moment, and now this moment. So this body full of intelligent water is storing the memories of our life. And I have always thought that one of the greatest things that we can do once we pass over is to be and to leave behind to be a great memory in the hearts of others. Because when I think about my mum or my godfather or the beautiful people that I have known that have passed on, that's what they've left for me. I think about them and I'm like, oh, man, that was great. They were so amazing. I loved them so much. And that link remains because I have been very curious about water and spirit. And can I connect to spirit through the waters? And one of the more recent ones that I've done, and you probably already heard about the one I did with my mum, who really was a walking angel here. But I relatively recently did one about my grandmother. So my grandmother's name was Revis, and she was pretty radical back in the 40s. And she ditched my grandfather, and she remarried and flew from England to Miami. And from Miami, they caught a plane called the Star Ariel. It was a smaller plane. And they were flying to Barbados for their honeymoon. But they never got there because the plane disappeared over the Bermuda Triangle.
Whoa.
And if you Google the Star Ariel and the Bermuda Triangle, you'll read that it's still one of the cases that there was absolutely no reason why that plane should have gone down. And it happened the day before my mother's 8th birthday. So I never got to meet my grandmother, but I always wondered, and I felt her around me, and I always wondered what happened to her and what's going on in the Bermuda Triangle. And some lovely people found an article in these archives in England that had been written about the disappearance of the plane, about her and all of this. And so I basically printed it out and put my dish of water on top of it, asking, what happened? And the imagery was remarkable. The imagery was essentially a portal or vortex. And after having seen water design in so many different ways over 14 years and over 64,000 photos of water responding in these intelligent ways, it's a very unique way that water designed. It was circle after circle after circle going inward. And it really threw me. I'm like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. And I think that's where the sweet spot is, where you go into this work without expectation. Water will show you things that like blow you away, absolutely blow you away. I'm far more interested in what water wants to share with me now than for it to show me a replica of
what you're thinking or something like that.
But I would say water will override my thoughts for my feelings. Water is more interested in what I'm than what I'm feeling than what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And an example would be when I put flowers into the petri dish of water to see, will it design the flower? But if I'm just genuinely sad and there's something wrong or feels wrong, water will just design sad faces. It just reflects my feelings, not what I'm trying to do. And this is just another reason which leads me into wondering that I really don't think it's just this reactive kind of substance some call H2O that is just doing this somehow in some random kind of manner. No, there is nothing random about what I am seeing, not at all.
Well, I mean, that just goes back to authenticity again, right? Like what you are authentically feeling is being picked up by the water rather than what you are like wanting it to show you based on what you're thinking.
It's often the people that have the best relationships with water that have the assumption that water is going to show them something that they want to see. That's where water is the ultimate spiritual teacher.
Yeah.
Because I have had to learn how to be pretty neutral with my work, and water has been very, very patient with me as I've learned how to do that. But I think that's where I get this so much work from, because I am not attached to outcome. And when I am, I often choose not to do it.
That says so much about life, like life in general. I mean, water permeates all facets of this reality. Like that's everything that you say, I apply like, how does that apply in life? Because water permeates all facets of this reality,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's where my mind goes to every single time. I have one more thing related to emotions and easy water, then I would really like to get into your work with the autists.
Yeah.
I meant to ask this to Jerry, and by the time it crossed my mind, we were already 3 hours into our podcast, and he and I were both kind of like, okay, this is time. So you brought up how in the imagery, when it came to grief, it was the outline of a man, and it appeared that there were a lot of holes in water, right? Versus, in an extreme example, joy on the other end of that is like, some same outline, but then like light coming out of the water, right? And I've thought about this so much. If there's any studies, whether published or not, or anything that you've done or Jerry has done, or anyone who studies water related to, like maybe taking the David Hawkins scale, for example, and seeing when you take water from someone who is in a state of just intense bliss and joy, seeing how much of an exclusion zone there is relative to water from someone who is like in deep, let's take, for example, like guilt or shame or just rage or something like that, and seeing how much of an exclusion zone there is there. Are you familiar with anything like that?
I mean, there's examples a bit like that in my book. I've also, will add, people are very addicted to seeing the best and worst of things. And there is a lot of amazing things to be seen in between. But when you're talking exclusion zone, there are various ways to even see different aspects of that in my work. So we could say that my work is in a state of liquid crystal. And one of the best examples that I give for that is that Christina, who's one of my top crystallographers in New Zealand, did this beautiful crystallography. She used a glass baking dish. So it's more of a rectangular shape. And there was all of the beautiful designs on there. And normally what happens as you hold up the dish is that it will evaporate and melt. But that's not exactly what happened. What happened was that it slid down and it scrolled upon itself. So you can see that there is more viscosity in there. It had all the patterning on there. So we know we're working with a unique, more viscous state. But one of the things that I've also observed is that over periods of time, you start to see that with some imagery, there is a boundary. So, for example, it doesn't take up the whole dish and you just have half the dish. That, say, half that dish might have a space, which could be as thick as this, which is pure and shiny and silver. And that is, and you can see there is absolutely really nothing in it, and it gives off this really mercury-like look. And that is one of the areas that you could say is definitely fourth phase water. So with somebody who is in bliss and joy, and I've experienced that myself, those feelings, and I have seen imagery where you can see a very thick border of bright silver light coming out. And grief is a necessary thing.
Amen. And I want to be clear here. Like, I wasn't saying it's not.
No, I know.
It's if it gets to be a perpetual state of
it can start lending itself down into a darker depression. Right?
Exactly.
And it all comes back into the variations of light. So what we see is more cloudiness. And we see with anger and frustration, thickness in the ice where it shouldn't actually happen like that. What we see with anger and frustration, for example, is that we're using and doing the exact same method, and it is a tiny thin layer of ice. It's only millimeters, a couple of millimeters thick, and it lets lots of light come through from the background, which is why you see lots of color in my work. But you can also see reflections of light and light emanating out of it. So what is a very curious anomaly, really, to me, is that with anger and frustration, the ice somehow thickens by a couple of millimeters and also clouds. And it really shouldn't cloud. because cloudiness comes with all the salts and minerals and the stuff in the water as it freezes to the second and third layer. So I'm freezing water at the first freeze, where there is liquid on top and ice underneath. And then I'm tipping the liquid away and photographing the crystallography on the dish. At that stage, the ice as it's formed has pushed all of the solates and things that water holds out. And what makes it cloudy is when the water that holds all of that freezes over. So you don't see that in distilled water, for example. An ice cube made of distilled water will be clear. An ice cube made with salts and minerals and various things from it will be more cloudy. But at the stage of my freezing, we're seeing that it's pushed all of that out. So the only real reason it should be cloudy should be because more of that kind of water has frozen over it, but that's not the case. So it's really unusual.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I'm just like wondering what happens inside us, relating it to the biofield too, because like Eileen will talk about that if you're in a, perpetually fearful, perpetually anxious, perpetually guilt, perpetual shame state, your biofield sort of contracts. And it's like because your body is really trying to conserve its energy as much as it possibly can just for you, not wanting to share that energy as much with other people, trying to work through that. And then I would just be so interested to measure the electrical potential coming off of the waters of our body when we're in those states too. It would be really hard to do that though, but yeah, I'm just like infinitely curious about that, because if you talk about like chi, prana, life force energy, Jerry and I talked about that quite a bit, and that negative charge is just like lots and lots and lots of negative charge potential energy for the body. And if we're in those perpetual states of those so-called negative emotions, not allowing it to flow through us as it should so we can come back to homeostasis, then I just really wonder what that would look like with the negative charge of our bodies. I don't think anyone's done anything like that to measure it, but I think if your work can indicate anything, it's kind of clear what's going on.
I think emotions are often seen in variations of light. So when you're sad, if you're feeling depressed, it's just not as much light as coming out, and it shows in the crystallography. It's not in any way judgmental, but it is reflective of your emotional state. Circling quickly around before we get into my work with the autists, which I think is my most profound work to date, to be honest.
Saving it for last.
We did touch on a potential of the world with different technologies in the world of water. And many people have just put water over as an element, just one element out of all the other elements. But actually, water is in all elements, including even fire. So like hydrogen,
Really?
yes. So as another technology, there was a man called Jonathan Butts, and he also wrote in my book, and he was working with water as phaser. It's like a cross between a flame and a laser. And it is essentially a type of water vapor that burns at something like 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's implosion. So you get close to it and it's cold. It's not hot.
What?
Yeah. And I have a video of that I can share with you.
I believe you. I'm just mind blown right now.
It's really incredible. But if you just look at the word hydrogen, like if you look at the sun is like full of hydrogen, right? Well, hydrogen is hydro, water, and genesis. So it is the creator of water. And so if you think of the sun evaporating and the water being evaporated, it's like the sun bringing its children back home. So there are many, many ways you could kind of look at it. But there was a man who was looking for a cure for cancer, and he ended up getting a test tube of salt water. And I, funnily enough, had written a whole thing about this a long time ago, before I ever found out about this guy. And so it's salt water in a test tube and an applied, like a microwave current of some kind was applied to it, and a flame ignited from the water that looked like lightning.
Whoa.
And this was actually on the news in America. And I have never heard anything more about it ever again.
It was cool earlier when you were talking about how water seems to have like the abilities of precognition. I immediately thought of in the telepathy tapes where I think it's episode 7 or 8 where Houston is feeling, spelling that he's feeling pretty down because he just learned, I think he said from God, because he at night he refers to God. And I think it's because he grew up in a Christian home. So that's the word that he uses. Likewise, that's the word that I use. I prefer the term God myself because it carries some sort of weight to it. And I don't mean some guy with a beard in the sky by any means. I have quite a complex, unique definition for God. But that being said, Houston is talking about how God is telling him of a school shooting that is about to happen 3 days later. And the school shooting, of course, does happen 3 days later. And I just think it's so cool. When you first told me, I think a month ago, that you're working with autists, I was like, oh my goodness. I can't even imagine where this is going to go. And I know you've now come to learn through them, independent of each other, that I love you, Jerry. You've done tremendous work. There's more than 4 phases of water. And Jerry might know that too, but that independent of each other, there's 7 phases of water. And I'm sure you've learned so much other incredible stuff from them too. So I thank you for allowing me to watch that video of Noah and Adriana. It was freaking mind blowing. Damien, who's just off camera right now, and I were talking when we were at dinner the other day about, he was like, yeah, I've read Walter Russell and all these other people. And he had to like pause 10 minutes in and be like, Veda,
he did.
What are we watching right now? Because of just the mind-blowing, heart-opening information that they're sharing about water. And that's exactly how I felt. So I hadn't watched all of it because I wanted to have the authentic experience of watching it fully the day before. So Kylie and I watched all of it last night. And yeah, that's exactly how I felt too. Like multiple moments that I had to pause it and like really reflect on what I just heard and like really, really deeply reflect. I'm sure I'll continue to do that the more I go back and watch it. It's one of those things, and that's how you know it's profound. There's like more gravy to take out of it each time to really reflect on. So yeah, let's get into your work with the autists.
Yeah. Well, this happened very organically, as pretty much all of my work has, and also synchronicity, as in a synchronistic way. So I was kind of stuck in a way on one of my hydroglyphs. And really just quickly recapping, a hydroglyph is essentially a symbol in ice that needs to have repeated at least 50 times using a written word influence and the same word in multiple languages, essentially giving us a language of symbols. And I'm not saying water is reading words. I'm saying it's picking up on the energy signature of the word, reverse engineering it back to some kind of living principle. So that's,
and if people want to learn more about the hydroglyphs, again, I'll link in the show notes, episode 89. We go pretty deep into the hydroglyphs there.
So there's one symbol which shows up with the word information. But in the last year and a half, it's been showing up regardless of using that word or not. 8 out of 10 people around the world that do this work, if they've done it more than a couple of times, seem to be seeing the information hydroglyph. And it looks just like ancient language and coding. And I gave a talk about my work with hydroglyphs in Lisbon at the annual water conference last year. And that I was asked to just show repeatability. So it was just, thing after thing after thing, but I couldn't help it. I'm like, yeah, but this one's so interesting. Here are 4 examples of this coding, this information glyph that I have, and let's compare it to hieroglyphs in cuneiform. And then it was all on one slide, and it's undeniable, actually, that looks like coding. And this one guy took a photo of it and put it into ChatGPT and said, identify the ancient languages. And it identified the comparisons, but I identified little pieces out of the information hydroglyph. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if I could learn anything more. Now, I have to say I've worked with artificial intelligence for 3 days until I realized it wasn't for me. And this isn't against anyone or anything. It's just not
for you.
My way, and it's not the way water wants to take me. But it gave me one interesting, helpful thing, is that it took the background out of one particularly complex one I have. And that allowed me to see the real coding embedded inside of it. And it was overwhelming. because when you look at it, it is just undeniable. And then even when you kind of close in and you look closer and then you look even closer, and I'm just like, even a tiny strand of this coding, it's like, how am I ever going to know anything about this? This is so much. And at that point, I'm like, I'm feeling addicted to working with this artificial intelligence. I need to stop. This is not the right direction for me. And I have to listen to water. And if I'm not doing that, then I'm not doing my job properly. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to leave it alone and see what else comes up. And Ryan and I, we watched the telepathy tapes. And Ryan said to me, wouldn't it be amazing if you could ask them about your work and see what they say? And I was like, oh my God, yeah, that would be just so incredible. And at this point, I knew that I was going to eventually meet Dr. Diane, and I'm like, well, maybe there can be a connection made there. And so I gave a talk in Nelson in New Zealand, which is in the South Island. And when I gave that talk, I just kind of announced, no one expected me to say it, and I even didn't know I was going to say it. I said, you know what, I really want to work with the autists, and that's what they call themselves. So if you hear me say autists, you know why. The autists, from the telepathy tapes, that's what I'm putting out to the world. And there was a lady in the audience who was in episode 10 from South Africa, and she is telepathic with some of the children or young people. And she said, oh, let me introduce you. It would be amazing. And so one thing led to another, and now I'm working with about 7 of the autistic non-speakers, some from the telepathy tapes and some not. And the first thing I did was send 12 images of my information glyph just to see what information they might give me back. What are these? What do you think about these? But I originally was working with Sammy, and Sammy is telepathic with her mother, and she is in her 20s. And I sent them over, and I actually sent 11 because one wasn't that clear. And so Sammy's mum wrote back, well, Sammy's saying there's meant to be 12 and that you'll know which one to add in. And I'm like, okay, here we go. Right, wow. Okay, wow. Right off the bat. And and so, okay, all right, there's 12, okay. And then I sent another lot of 12. And then, I'm happy to read you what Sammy wrote and said about that, which I'll pull up in 1 second. But then I sent it on to other non-speakers, and some of whom are telepathic with their parent or their telepathic communicator, but some can also type and use a letterboard, and so they're able to communicate also for themselves, and many of their parents encourage that as well, so that they can really get more comfortable with speaking in that way for themselves. So I've got some very consistent feedback. The overarching feedback of what this information hydroglyph is saying is that, firstly, in the viewing of the images is different variations of healing. And that was kind of a big piece. So I'm now going into, well, what would be the ideal picture to view for somebody who is depressed, somebody who is sick with this or sick with that or whatever the thing is? What would be the one to expand joy? What would be the one to expand curiosity? And they're helping me. And I hope one day I can have like a healing arts gallery where we can have these beautiful images up. And really, they also say that there is sound that comes off each one. And one young man got his mum to print it out, and he said, you can only have this one up for 1 day because it is so loud, but he wanted it on his wall to help manifest something in his life. And there was one Sammy, one young woman, as I said, she's telepathic with her mum, and she was looking through her mum's eyes at one of the images specifically. And her mum actually said to me, at this point, I actually wonder sometimes if I have any thoughts of my own, because this has been going on for so long. So her daughter, she can feel it when her daughter is looking at imagery through her eyes. And Sammy was getting ready to do a music lesson, and she hadn't been able to fully play a whole song in one go yet. But after having looked through the eyes at this one image, she actually played a whole song in one go.
Wow.
So my hope as we progress, and it is, it will take time perhaps, is that there is coding that could even help the autistic non-speakers.
Wow.
Or even just autistics or anyone.
Yeah.
In the future.
Mm.
But the most common word across all of them was that these are doorways to consciousness, doorways to other realms of consciousness. Daniel said every little line is a doorway into other realms of consciousness. And if you see this imagery, you see just how many lines there are. And that's just like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went on this Zoom with them, because I was first introduced on a kind of Zoom for the autistic community, I'm not normally nervous, in interviews, and I speak in front of loads of people. I actually really enjoy speaking, but this time I felt a bit nervous.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting there and I said, at this point, I am willing to put down everything I think I know about water and be ready to be wrong, to be able to speak with you guys. And they have been so incredibly supportive. And so many of the things that I have hypothesized, that I have felt or intuitively kind of thought about, they have come in and supported and gone, that is actually absolutely right, plus this and plus this.
Incredible.
It's been amazing.
Hey y'all, I'm here with Melissa Kupsch from Remedy Academy of Homeopathy. We are so stoked here at the Way Forward to be partnering with Melissa and Remedy in order to spread the message of homeopathy across the world, and also to partner on the eventual development of healing centers across the United States.
People are pretty quickly coming to realize that frequency is the future of medicine. We are witnessing the great resurgence of homeopathy right now. We're really moving away from that suppressive medical model. Whether it's for eczema, asthma, hormones, fertility, anxiety, depression, trauma, whatever it is, it all starts as energy in the person's field first. If we change our field, we can completely change our life. Our 2-year academy is open worldwide to anyone who wants to become a homeopath. We've got 5 lecturers and we currently have over 500 students enrolled, which is record numbers in our field. A career in homeopathy is amazing for anyone who wants flexibility in their work and who wants to be valuable in creating this new world. We have stay-at-home parents enrolled, we have ex-medical professionals, grandparents signed up who want to learn how to heal their grandchildren and pass on that invaluable knowledge. We even have husband and wife teams. So my husband enrolled in the course with no prior knowledge of health as a background, and he is loving it.
Kylie is also enrolled as well, so my partner is, and she's so stoked to become a homeopath and to be helping to spread this message across the world.
The thing that we hear from so many of our students is, I found my thing. Homeopathy is the key. We harness frequencies from nature and we alter the field of all creations. So if anybody wants to join us or they want to know more about it, they can visit our website.
Yeah, and all that information will be in the show notes. So if you want to learn more about Remedy Academy, also RMDY Collective, also some of the homeopathic products that they have, please just head to the show notes. All of that will be listed there. Most healthcare today operates on an outdated mechanistic model, treating the body like a battlefield rather than a self-healing system. You wait months for an appointment only to receive a rush diagnosis that labels you rather than truly understanding your unique health. Even in holistic health, many practitioners rely on endless lab tests and supplement protocols, addressing symptoms instead of the root cause. And the result? Another prescription or supplement regimen that merely suppresses or masks symptoms rather than facilitating true healing, whether the imbalance was physical, emotional, energetic, or a mix of all three. And that's why Dr. Tom Cowan co-founded the New Biology Clinic, to offer something radically different. As one of the most respected natural health doctors in the world, Dr. Cowan has spent decades challenging conventional medicine and advancing a deeper understanding of human biology, water, and natural health. His work isn't just about rejecting the mainstream, it's about offering a more truthful, biologically coherent approach for healing. The New Biology Clinic recognizes that health isn't about fighting disease, it's about restoring balance. You're not a diagnosis, you're an individual with a unique story, and healing should honor that. With virtual consultations available worldwide, the clinic offers a flat-rate monthly membership that gives you direct access to practitioners who take the time to actually listen. Members also get exclusive health live streams, a resource library, and live sessions covering everything from biofield tuning and breathwork to movement and meditation, all designed to support whole body healing. And if you're not ready for a membership, you can book a one-time appointment, sign up for an enrichment-only membership for the healing modalities alone, or schedule a free connection session with one of the care team members to see how the New Biology Clinic can help in your specific situation. This isn't about keeping you dependent on doctors. It's about making you sovereign over your health. Head to newbiologyclinic.com and use code THEWAYFORWARD, and that's spelled The Way, F-O-R-W-A-R-D, for $50 off account activation, or just head to the show notes for more info. If you're a member of The Way Forward, email hello@thewayforward.com for $150 off. Your body already knows how to heal, and New Biology Clinic helps you remember.
Would you like me to read some of the
Yeah,
things
while you're
they've
pulling that up,
said?
I'll just rant on some things real quick that are top of mind for me. First thing is, it's so interesting that they have independently shared that there are 7 phases of water. Think about there are 7 chakras. The Law of One raw material talks about how there's 7 densities of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible refers to the number 7 so many times. And then you're also working with 7 nonverbal autistic kids. So like the crossover between all those is pretty wild to think about. Yeah. Marinate on that for a little bit.
You're talking about these 7 states. Well, one of the reasons that we're talking about that is because I have asked them all independently, and that was always something I believed, I'd thought was true, but I had no real way yet of quantifying it. But hearing it from individual autistic non-speakers all the same, and also having it on camera, and also having them not only telepathically share, but to type it or to use their letterboard, it's been very confirming. But Elsa, who we're filming when we go to Florida, she used her letterboard to say 7 states of water. And then I asked her, is it possible for you to share what the states of water are that we might not know of yet in our world? And the first thing she said was that thought is the first state of water. And I'm still processing that. The second state is where 2 frequencies come together to create light. So we're having thought and we're having light. And then another state, which we can get into if you want, she's talked about as a gas we haven't identified yet. And we don't even know that we can call it gas exactly. So it's hard to give a name or explain something we haven't yet discovered, but she has alluded to it as something that that Ryan has seen in his dishes, which I think is fascinating, which I'd love to kind of touch on slightly too. And when you want me to do that, I can do it now or later. Yeah. So one of the autists, and this was so important to him, his name's Mikolai. I mean, they're all amazing, right? And he's an incredible young man. And his mum, after having started working in this area of water, right, his mum had always known of him that he never wanted to have anything to do with the letterboard or typing or anything. He'd always thrown it away. It's too slow, telepathy's much easier and all of this. And so I had missed this invitation, this urgent invitation that to hop on a Zoom call with a group of them, including the mum and Mikolai. And when I rewatched it, it turns out that Mikolai had typed something for the very first time in his life, and it was to me.
Whoa.
I'm like, oh my God, because that's like a big deal.
Yeah.
Right? And his message essentially was about plasma and the living qualities and energetics of what could be seen as kind of plasma beings, if you will, or plasma, states of plasma. And he encouraged us to take photos outside of the night sky. So Ryan was right on it. And he went outside and he took a photograph of the night sky. And where we live in New Zealand, it's beautiful sky, it's clear night. And it kind of just looked like black with a bit of stars, So Ryan started playing with the adjustments of light in the phone, on the phone. And as he started to do that, we started to see this kind of patterning appear, which looks like a kind of squiggly coding. And it kind of, to me, represented aspects of that information glyph. And my first thought, and what I said to him, I said, oh, imagine if that's like the fabric of the universe. And what if that's like this and that? And he's very good at being quite scientific and really wanting to make sure that, we just need to make sure this is not like kind of anomaly on the phone and kind of, so, you just got to cover all of the bases, which of course is an important thing to do because you want to make sure. And so we went into all of that and he's looking at it going, and we showed it to the autists and they were encouraging us to go further because they're saying it's not an anomaly. So then Ryan starts really working with crystallography, and he's been doing a lot of crystallography in the last few months since we've been working with the autists. And he has observed something really interesting in that when he has photographed and got the information hydroglyph, this coding that I've been talking about for the last while, and then observed it melting, in the melted stage or in the melting stage, which is this kind of a more plasmatic stage, and you could think, is it fourth phase or is it something else? He's seen the exact same patterns repeat, and he has seen them throughout so many of his dishes. And we're not just looking at exactly ice. It is not the crystallography that I'm seeing. In fact, it almost suggests that there is this underlying, unique, potential other state that is underneath the ice, that is informing the ice with information, or the water as it freezes with information, and that it remains even after the ice is melting. And so we are seeing, or he is seeing, coding in the night sky that looks exactly the same as this coding in this unique state that he's found in the watery ice state. And when we talked to the autists and Ryan was showing the photos and videos that he's taken, and he is thorough, right? He does things very thoroughly. So he takes this very, very seriously, and he's really gone through it, trying to make sure that this is in fact something really viable.
Right.
Well, they said that this is indeed another state of water, that it is like consciousness in the observing space, and also that it is more like a gas that we haven't that was stated, more like this. It's the best described as a kind of almost gas, I guess, that hasn't been observed yet.
Wild.
And so there's much more to be discovered there. And the pictures always speak 1,000 words. And I always think Ryan should be the one telling this story because he's the one that's been really in it. And, I'm trying to encourage him to do that.
We almost did that.
We almost did that.
We conspired Ryan.
We
Ryan's
did.
just
We
sitting
were
right off.
conspiring.
We did. We're like, I'm going to call him up.
But
we
when
didn't
he's
do it. Okay.
properly ready.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Ryan, is there anything that I've missed that I should add in there? Yeah. So gas / pure energy.
See, my mind goes back to you on this, like the possibility, because they're implying that it's in and around all of us at all times, right? This phase of it.
I've seen it outside of the dish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've seen it when you take photographs of the night sky. You see it in the dish. Really?
Yeah. It's like everywhere.
That's what I'm saying is I wonder if this is just another way that they're describing what I've come to understand, and others too, as ether. Some call it the information field. Some call it this. Some call it that. And it stores the Akashic records. within it.
And see, one of the reasons that I even started talking about the Akashic records is I think if they were to be stored in anything, it would be a state of water.
Yeah.
Given how many states there are of water, there are over 300 different types of ice. I could probably write a whole thing about one state for the rest of my life.
Wow.
So for us to even try to comprehend the subtleties of all of these things, it's just like, oh my God.
Well, one thing that sticks out to me real quick, hold your thought, because I remember mine that I had lost my train of thought on, was that you and others who are working with water, your crystallographers across the world, kept on seeing the information glyphs pop up, like no matter what you were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then now it's led you to this.
Yeah.
Have you, I'm sure you have you thought that this is God, creator, like guiding you towards this by like, hey, look, like I'm putting this in all the waters across the world of all the crystallographers, and or the autists are projecting their thought energy onto the water because they were trying to get in touch with you this whole time. So they're popping up through all the people around you with the information glyph, and then also in your water. Like, have you thought about that at all?
I mean, anything is possible at this point, and very little surprises me. I mean, I still do get surprised, but I think that we are entering into a different time.
Yeah.
Where people are more open and ready to hear this kind of information. And that water, they even said that water has revealed itself now and it doesn't want to be unseen anymore.
Mm.
You know, an interesting thing that they also said is that as water is forming from a liquid into this crystallography, there is a point where it's like, and it might be just the way it's translated from telepathy, but where it's like, what happens next? A bit like us. Many people think at the end of the life, what's going to happen next, right? And so the water decides that it's going to give it out the biggest imprint of its lifetime to the world in that moment. Its biggest memory, its biggest thought, its last imprint or last memory. And that is really interesting. And I said, is that a bit like what people do? You know, where just before we pass over, there is a whole heap of memories that come to us that we get to experience, and then we move on to have another experience. And there was a real crossover there where they were saying it's a bit like that. And so, you know, I found that really interesting within the humanness of the way that we're talking about water. And I think it's really nice when you hear how they've spoken about water and when I've asked the question, what is water to them?
Yes, let's hear it.
Right.
Please, yeah.
So what we're hearing from Sammy now is what she said about the information hydroglyph, this coding. And I'll send it to you so you can have a look at it and share it with everybody. So Sammy says that the general message of the images is about foundational structure. I'll just bring it over here so I can see it better. To build or co-create the new. The images are like music, actually. And to be honest, they've all kind of mentioned it like music as well. Like there's sound and music within this imagery. Sheet music to inform everything that is matter on the planet, that a cosmic cycle has closed and a new epoch is beginning. And this is relative to what we were just talking about. The way the lines are is like foundational structure at the pre-manifestation levels. And then Daniel, he says they are doorways into another realm of consciousness. Each code is a doorway. Each little line is a doorway. It represents God consciousness experiencing itself as multiple doorways as God consciousness expresses itself through multiple humans. Veda is uncovering something that has not been seen before. And I always say that surprised me because I always thought it was an ancient thing.
Like you're
right?
rediscovering ancient things.
That's
No, this is something new.
Apparently so. So she is unveiling a consciousness that is ready to be seen. Again, that comes back to what we were just saying. But a direct translation is difficult because it is not writing as we know it. It is all multi-dimensional form, and one must take into consideration angles and colors and the way the writing is connected. I want to focus on the word doorway because it is the best word I can give to what hydroglyphs are offering. It is a doorway of a stream of consciousness, and it goes deep into the cells of the body because our bodies are made up of water. And that is from Daniel.
Oh my goodness.
And then for anyone that has watched the telepathy tapes, episode 8, there is a young man called Kyle who's like a musician. And so I spoke to Caroline, and she told me that when she showed Kyle the pictures and asked what they were, he spoke the word doorways.
Like spoke out loud.
Yeah.
Wild.
So then I asked the question of what is water, and they also gave me 3 pictures which they say are healing, of which I can share with you if you want, and you can
Yes,
share with
please.
others. So this is the question, what is water? And this is Mikolai answering this. And so Mikolai said, to ask the question, what is water, one must ask, what is the creator before form? So this is like, you know, you need time to process these things. Hence, my life in the last 4 months has been like a rapid.
Dude. What?
Yeah, and so Sammy said, water is a redeemer. It washes away much like Source cleansing you, and the mysteries of water will dazzle you and dazzle humanity. It indeed reflects Source Creator sentient consciousness. It's the hall of records and the hall of mirrors, and it knows all your secrets. And Noah says, water is the expression of the Creator's first love. It is a being that Creator never wants to separate from. Therefore, it's in everything. It's love.
Can I pause real quick?
Mm-hmm.
All-knowing, omniscient, omnipotent, benevolent. Yeah.
Adriana says, and this is Noah's sister, who is also autistic, non-speaking. It's embedded in everything. We see water's essence in the watermarks. Is the energy not still there? Do we not see that water has been there? We can still feel it. Can you not hear the water in a shell? Even after the water is gone, the water still echoes. So therefore, I would say that yes, indeed, it is a sentient being. And Daniel says, Veda is tapping into something that is essentially tapping into the consciousness of God. And then I have a video which you're welcome to share, which is my conversation with Elsa. And Elsa has her mum with her in the video. And you can also see up the top Melissa, who is her telepathic communicator. In this particular situation, Elsa is using a letterboard, so doesn't need to communicate through telepathy.
Will you play it for me?
Elsa, one of the questions is, what is water?
She says, G, you gotta look at the word, O-D, God is in the W-A-T-E-R. God is in the water.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about how they're talking about the first phases of water are thought
Well, we
and
can
then light.
We can let Elsa, so I've got that on video as well, where she's communicating that.
Oh yeah, let's throw that in
Yeah.
as well. We'll throw that in right after this. And then how, I forget who answered this though, but that to ask what is water, you first need to ask what is the creator before form. And then she's saying God is in the water, and God, and water seems to be, like I said, all the omnis.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, one of the most fascinating things, Alec, has been by using and working with this topic of water, there is not one single non-speaking autist that has not connected water with God. Not one. They all do. And this young man, he says, water is life, it's living, it's intelligent, it carries the wisdom of the earth, it's our greatest gift. And he goes on to say it's God.
Mm.
And then I asked Elsa, how many states of water are there? And the video I'm about to show is where it's just too complex a thing to write in the letterboard. And so her mum says, Elsa, do you want to work with Melissa? And you can see Elsa say yes, like say yes. You can see an affirmative there. And then Melissa goes on to talk about two of them. It's a long video, and I am honestly still processing so much of it that, and I'm working on all of this for my PhD right now.
Mm.
So it has to get really clear for me because there's some pretty high, big topics that I need to ask more questions for to get even more clarity because it's kind of like a huge deal what we're dealing with here and what we're working with.
I'm curious if you can tell me how many stages or phases of water are there?
You know, number 7.
Everyone, it's wonderful. Across the board, everyone says the same thing. It's always said.
Wow.
Always.
Wow.
Now, I have a question that you may or may not be able to answer, but can you describe any of the stages of water that we don't know about yet in this world?
You want Melissa to talk for you? Yeah.
She said the first state of water is the thought. The thought is the initial state. The second state is the transformation of the two different frequencies that meet up to make the light of the water. And one.
Just a little teaser into what else is coming. And like I said, I'm still working on this. And so that, as well as working with these young people, has inspired me to go forth and start making a documentary. Because I don't think at this point, how could I not?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know about making go. I don't know what the heck. I've added this in as well as my book tour just to make things really interesting.
Not that you don't already have enough going on.
No, but this is such a big deal, and the world is ready now. Yes. I think that, and they are working behind the scenes in ways that I don't think they need to be behind the scenes anymore. Amen. I want to do everything I can for their voices to be heard. So I have some other insights I can share with you if you like.
Yeah, real quick. Yeah. I want people to just comprehend the mere fact that video we shared, she responds, yes, that she would rather communicate through Melissa. Melissa is in her car driving or sitting in the passenger seat, God knows how far away, and she, Elsa is her name, is directly communicating with Melissa, who is communicating on her behalf. And that seems to be sort of like a afterthought of the video. Like, what? Like, so that's like okay, that's cool. Like casual, like instantaneous communication with someone who's like thousands of miles away. What?
No. And you know what's amazing? Is that Melissa was saying that she has been in touch and communicating with Elsa for years.
Wow.
But she thought Elsa was an angel.
Oh my. Well, Diane and I just talked the other day about how like the autists, they describe like blue light beings themselves. But if I remember correctly, Diane may not have said this, but like obviously they can astral project, they can remote view, they can do all these things. They can really leave their body because I think they're not really fully entrenched in their body anyway, because their bodies become too inundated with this world, the toxicity of this world, which has enabled them to more readily access the things that are metaphysical, right? I have some interesting ideas on that. Setting that aside, it's like I do wonder for some people. I've thought that if yes, there are angels that are like objective, I believe that have never taken physical form, but if some of these entities, just like what Melissa's saying, that we experience could be autists, like remote viewing or something like that. The other day, Reese, remember yesterday after Dr. Edith episode? You remember that, Laura? When you were all standing right there, I didn't see it because I was more tucked in by the door. You guys, all three saw a flash of light at the same time. You, Reese, and Dr. Edith. And those, we had the curtains open, but there's no way a flash of light could have come in given how high we are in this building right now. Other than, something else. And the conversation I had with Dr. Edith was incredibly profound, as you both know, and many of the audience knows, came out before this one. So, man, whoa.
Well, shall we move on to a few other insights?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I mean, I think so. Maybe the audience needs to pause for the next 3 hours and really take that in. But yeah.
No, I mean, what I'm so thrilled about is that when we're filming in Florida, it's actually the first time that Elsa and Melissa will meet in person.
Wow.
So, it's a big deal.
That's a huge deal. Yeah.
So this was fascinating. And since you've now seen that whole video, you would have seen this part. But Adriana said our conscious focus on searching for water on Mars is actually seeding water on Mars. So we should start to find more water on Mars based off the fact that our conscious expressions are putting more focus there.
Thought, light, oriented somewhere, collectively.
But not only
creation.
that, she's saying that Mars has agreed to it, which is
Wild.
maybe an important piece. So I had to ask this question. And this is to Brandon. We're also filming Brandon. And I said, well, what do you say to the scientists that say that water can't store memory? Because there's plenty of mainstream scientists that say it's absolute bollocks. And they say water is in molecular chaos, right? It's hydrogens, the bonds are breaking and everything. It's updating its information every trillionth of a second. How is it possibly interested in one thing? But if you were to ask the same question to a quantum physicist, they could say, well, yeah, there's a difference, though, between molecular chaos and molecular excitement. When you're excited about something, there is a focus. And certainly, if it is receiving information through light and there is attention and focus when given the right environment, you can see that information show up, which is what I think we're seeing in my work.
Yeah.
But so I said, what would you say to these scientists? And Brandon said, in his own really kind of fun way, he had a fun way he was saying this, almost jokingly. And he said, well, what do you think holds memory then? It isn't the electricity in our brain. It isn't the organs in the brain. How do you think we hold memory? It's the water within us.
Wild.
And then I was asking about morning dew, because it's often referred to like the Holy Spirit. And the question is, what is dew? And Noah said, it's the appreciation between God and nature. It's the moment when they have met when others haven't been around. It's a peace offering to each other, and it's an affirmation or agreement that today everything's all right and we are here for each other. And Brandon said, it's as though God kissed nature and nature gave back. It's a reminder that the two are together still. The shared information and the pureness of the energy. It's the time when they get to meet and honor each other and see each other and note each other for their beauty before it is distorted by the gatherings of the day, like star-crossed lovers in the night waiting for the sunset before anyone disrupts them like a hidden marriage. Oh, I love that. And Daniel says, dew is the energy that holds the most light between God and nature.
Wow.
And I was also speaking to a lady who is telepathic with horses. And she was sharing that when she asked the horses, because I said, well, ask them about water and ask them about dew. And she was working with wild horses and domesticated horses. And the wild horses said, she said they almost laughed at the idea of the question of what is water, because to them, water is one and the same as them. They are constantly in search of water every day. It's what they're looking for outside of grass. And with domesticated horses, given the kind of troughs that they drink from, they see water in a separate way, right? Okay, so then you look at us putting water in containers and constantly and all of this kind of thing, and well, that's a whole nother conversation. But when it came to morning dew, both types of horses agreed 100% that it reminds them of the light of the Creator.
Wow. I mean, that's why we as human beings look at morning dew with like so much awe.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It is, I mean, I've done some work with dew, and it's the purity of dew is truly incredible. And actually, there's been some people tell me that this has happened to them, that when they go out and they have aches and pains, and they go out early in the morning and they put dew on the pain, it goes away. When they put dew on their face, it helps clears up, rosacea and acne and various things. There's healing properties in dew. And it's even suggested through Victor Schauberger that there is the possibility that dew itself, before it drops, is in levity, right? At the end of the leaf. So I love these words of hope from Sammy. And I think that this is what you had, that you...
Yes.
So she says this. She says, things that are out of tune and out of harmony will cease to exist, because the power of all this is overtaking the planet at rapid rates and cannot be stopped. We're too far along in the process. No one saw us coming, and the evil ones could not see our true potential. Even if they tried to stop us with poisons, they did not know that they helped us stay out of the body and bring in something new. Yeah, Sammy.
While you're looking for the next one, that just makes so much sense as to what I thought when I was listening to the telepathy tapes. I was thinking to some children that I know, like even my son, who is incredibly gifted, incredibly connected, and like has these instantaneous downloads. He's the one who predicted that Kylie was pregnant before we even knew, like all the things, right? He even acknowledges sometimes, like, yeah, he feels like he struggles to be in his body.
Yeah.
But now he calls me out on it too. I'm like, hey, anytime you see me zoning out, like, let me know. Because there's like a disassociative way, but then there's also like a way to access, right?
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, he really struggles to fully be in his body. But with that comes these incredible intuitive gifts. So when I was watching the telepathy tapes, I was thinking the whole time that these children have become so inundated with the toxicity of the body. And because the souls that are coming in right now, I think tend to be more sensitive themselves because they're already so much more advanced themselves, because they're coming here right now for a specific purpose. So when they get here and they incarnate into a body that is then overloaded with too much toxicity, it's almost like an adaptation and also a natural response that I can't deal with this physical body. It's too much for me. So because of that, and their soul's not fully entrenched within the body, they're in a much more expanded state. You talk to people who have near-death experiences. Even Dr. Edith yesterday, she had an out-of-body Qigong experience. And in that experience, she talked about when she had to integrate back into the body, fitting the fullness of what she really is back into that can be very claustrophobic and hard to integrate. So when you're in that expanded state, not as much entrenched into the body, the likelihood that you can access these other capabilities that are innate to all of us is much higher. And it makes sense with that quote, that last part. Even if they tried to stop us with poisons, they did not know that they helped us stay out of the body and bring in something new.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, no small thing. Melissa sent this through to me. It's on my phone, so I'll read this other part in a minute. But she was saying that the number one cause of death in autists is drowning. And she was explaining, and this was also written by the children, saying it's not because we just don't know where we're going, or we're clumsy, or we're just, all over the place. It's because the water feels like home. It's because for us, water is not judging. It doesn't care if we stim. It doesn't care if we can't speak properly. It doesn't care what we do or what we look like or any of those things. To them, water is home. And that some of them choose to go home because they have not found the safety or the feeling of oneness that they really want to feel in this world yet. And I think this is an important message, that we start to realize that we can help change their lives by seeing them in a new way. They don't want to feel special again. I want to add that. They don't want to go from that kind of special to this kind of special and be put on pedestals, but they want to be included in society. They want to be seen for who they are, not for how they look or what their bodies are doing. And they want to help. You know, I went on that first Zoom call and I said, well, I understand you guys want to help. I'm putting my hand up because I need help. To me, they are my team of experts and have access to these other realms of consciousness. Why would I not work with them? Of course, it makes the most sense. But I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to make a conscious decision to move forward in this world, to include them and not kind of be all awkward around them, because they are the paradigm shift we've needed to see in this world right now. And the telepathy have helped build bridges for those that were like, to actually go, wow. But now they're helping me in this realm. I mean, I'm sure they can help heaps of people in all their own focused areas. But for this is integrating all the living principles of life together. The creator of life, and then water, the living waters of life. I think this is remarkable, which kind of then lends me into something which I tend to close on in all of my talks. And I don't know who to credit. It's done the rounds on Instagram for years. I think it's very profound. But the question is, what if water was God? And I'm going to read it for you. Well, that would mean that God is in us and all around us, above us and below us. It would explain why a woman's water breaks when we're born and why some religions observe the ritual of baptism. And if water was God, then that would mean that God has no gender and God takes the shape of the container God appears in, which would explain why we have so many different belief systems. And it would mean that all bodies of water were holy, and that a thunderstorm is a church without walls, and that when the rain falls, it's an act of God's death giving life, and when it evaporates again, it's the day of resurrection. There's a lot of good food for thought there.
Man. This whole episode is one that people are going to have to watch like 10 times to digest. I'm struggling too right now. Wow. Oh my goodness. Oh, thank you for taking the time to be here to have this conversation.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Veda.
Oh, well, I love you, Alec. We will do. You know, you are helping bring so much to the world, and I so honor you for that.
Thank you. I love you too.